Welcome to the Blue White Breakdown presented by PennLive. I'm John McGonigal. Dave Jones here with us. We're
Where's
recording.
Bob?
Where is Bob? Where's Bob? He decides to take off this week, one of the busiest weeks of the year. The man knows what he's doing, Dave. He knows what he's doing. The transfer portal's open. You got a new defensive coordinator officially in now in Tom Allen. Yesterday was the early signing period starting. Penn State signed 25 guys. A lot going on for Penn State, and
How do you allow this? I mean, you got to start throwing your weight around a little bit.
What do you want me to
You
do?
can't just allow him to walk away.
The guy tells me, look, I have X amount of PTO days left. I got to use them before the year because they don't roll over. And to be fair, he offered to help with like recruiting stuff ahead of time. And I'm just like, take your time off, man. You know, like I took my time off in the summer, so can't complain. But yeah, Dave, so we're recording this here on Thursday afternoon. How are you doing?
It's too sunny. It's too bright for an old man.
You're like glare. You're like kind of peering through the glare there.
Well, we usually don't tape at 1:30, so now it's almost today is the winter solstice.
Is it?
Yes, it is. So this is as low as the sun ever is on the horizon in the north, and it's coming straight in the windows, and this never happens. Of course, we never tape at 1:30 either. So
yeah,
it's yeah.
But here we are. Where do you want to start, Dave? You want to start with? I can get into a little bit more signing day.
Get your recruiting stuff out of the way.
Get that stuff off,
and I'll just sit here with my coffee. All right, do that.
Well, really quick, 2 hours. I guess it was 2 hours ago at this point. Penn State actually got a commit for the 2025 class from Central Catholic. Xavier Thomas, defensive back.
Are you sure it's not Xavier?
It might be
2 X's.
There's 2 X's. He spells Xavier or Xavier, Xxavier. So we'll have to ask him that at some point, Dave. But
St. Joe's basketball has a guy who's XZX.
XZX.
XZX. And he's Xavier.
I love that.
Well, how many X's is too many? That's the first question you got to ask the kid. Have you talked to him yet?
No, I haven't. He
Why
likes
to? Yeah.
When I do,
he's got to be named Dos Equis, doesn't he?
Dave, I think he's like 16 years old, so he can't even think about having. Well,
you're a sports writer. You get it started. They do that in the South. Dos Equis.
That's true.
Saying.
So it was funny though, Dave. I was talking to Terry Smith yesterday after all the recruits come in, and they made Tom Allen available to us, James Franklin, and then some of the defensive and offensive recruiting coordinators. And Terry is the guy on the defense, Pittsburgh guy. And I asked him about Central Catholic and his relationship with those guys there, a powerhouse program in Pittsburgh. They got 2 guys coming to Penn State in the 2024 class, linebacker Anthony Specca and wide receiver Peter Gonzalez. And Terry gave a hint. He said, "Hey, look, we have a great relationship with Central Catholic. We're going to continue to recruit those guys." And he said, "Look out for a piece of news coming tomorrow, from Central Catholic." And I was wondering, I'm like, all right, who is it? Can I pre-write this? To lessen the load a little bit. And then I look and there's like 4 guys at least on their roster who could very well go to Penn State. There's 2027 defensive back Larry Moon.
You're getting into a little inside baseball. People probably don't know that if you can, you pre-write things, right?
Yes. Just to make your life easier.
Yeah. To be ready because immediacy is everything these days. So did you pre-write all 4, or what'd you do?
No, I said, look, I'm not going to pre-write all 4. Yesterday was a long day, signing day, getting started at 6:45, 7 in the morning, driving back from State College after all the press conferences. I'm like, I'm not pre-writing 4 guys.
But if you had had time, you might have.
I might have. Yes. Yeah. Yes. If I had time, I definitely.
And thrown away the other 3.
Exactly.
Because that's what we can do.
Or just save them, because there's a chance that they still get some of those guys from Central. But anyway,
people have no idea the stuff we throw away that is unused, especially on deadline writing. Yeah. I mean, the 05, the post 05 Orange Bowl. Are you familiar with that game?
Oh, yeah.
It was before you were even in college. How old were you?
I was in high school.
Yeah. Well,
no, not even. I was in like 7th grade.
You were 13. All right.
Yeah. Yep.
So this thing it was a late start anyway, and then it goes on and on and on. And Kevin Kelly and the Florida State kicker cannot kick the winning field goal. And I think the thing ended at 1. And all of us had written so many leads already that we just threw away because nothing ever came true. And by the end of that game, you have to get done by a certain time. You're just making stuff up. I mean, you're really just kind of writing free-form gibberish, that will fit in no matter what. And I still have never looked at that column I wrote because I don't want to be disappointed. But people do that all the time. That's just a little inside stuff that we probably shouldn't tell, but
that's a part of the job. I bet I definitely have thrown away stories or leads over the years, but I bet your lead graveyard is pretty stacked.
I simply learned that when you try to write stuff ahead of time, especially me, because I'm known for declaring that things are going to happen and then they don't happen.
Yep.
Which is why I'm Jinxie the Black Cat.
Yep.
So if I write a lead ahead of time, it's not going to happen anyway. I've just learned, and the older you get, the better you are on deadline. And I can pump out probably 500 words in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
That where early in my career, I was a lot less secure that you could do that. And you learn and learn and learn as you get older. You get more relaxed on deadline. But when you're in your 20s and 30s and you're on deadline like that, you can get really, really anxious and the words won't come and you just do whatever you have to do. But as you get older, it gets better.
Well, I remember, learning that. We're getting really off topic, but learning that.
Matter.
Yeah, who cares? Learning that big time, when I was a student at the Collegian and I was covering college basketball for the first time. I was covering Penn State and Pat Chambers and those guys. And college basketball is one, probably better than anyone, Dave, that those games change in the final 20 seconds and then you just scrap a story and you have to start over.
They usually read, and then, but then, and then, but then. And
then with 1 minute, 7 seconds left, and then with 57 seconds left, and it's just like flows punches. Yeah.
All right. We're boring the hell out of everyone, but it's my fault. Okay. So I'm curious. What did you think of Tom Allen?
Yeah, I thought he was kind of as expected. Like you hear him talk over the years in Indiana. Nothing that he said really surprised me. Really, like my question going into it, and I think a lot of people's questions going into it is like, why? Like, why are you taking this job when you just got a $15.5 million buyout?
Because I just love football. I got to get back in.
That's basically what he said, Dave. He said, "I'm a football guy. This is what I do."
He's a junkie. That's why.
Yeah, he's a glutton for punishment, I guess.
He's a junkie, yeah.
But then again, glutton for punishment. I mean, he's coming into a defense with, even though you're losing, Adisa Isaac, Chop Robinson, Curtis Jacobs, a lot of talent on this defense. Like he's coming into it with a pretty stacked group still. Even Denai Dennis Sutton and Abdul Carter. The list kind of goes on this defense. And so he talked about the excitement about coming into Penn State and having that kind of talent available to him. He talked about how much respect he's had for Penn State and James Franklin from afar, being in the Big Ten East for 7 years as a head coach and in 2016 as a defensive coordinator. He kind of has a unique perspective on what and how Penn State has kind of built itself or rebuilt itself over the last 10 years with James Franklin. So that was interesting to hear as well. But I'm curious just what your thoughts are on the hire, right? Because when Manny Diaz was hired, after the 2021 season, a lot of people was like, okay, this is kind of a no-brainer. A lot of people really love the hire. And I don't know if it's because he comes from Indiana or what, but it feels like it's been a little bit more like, hey, we're optimistic, but like we'll see kind of deal on Tom, at least from the fan base.
There's two ways to look at it. If you know anything about Tom Allen, I don't think he ever intended to be a head coach. He is a pure DC. I happen to know about him from South Florida because I know a former South Florida quarterback and his father, who was a former Penn State quarterback, Stephen Bench. Remember Stephen Bench?
Yeah.
He was back up to Matt McGloin. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, and when it was a weird circumstance how Tom Allen became head coach at Indiana. A lot of people probably don't remember because they ignore Indiana, just like people ignore Penn State basketball. I've always compared Indiana football, Penn State basketball, and Indiana basketball, Penn State football. They're kind of like reverse doppelgangers. But Kevin Wilson was the head coach, who was a kind of a legendary figure inside offensive football at Indiana. He was one of the very, very first forerunners of the spread option offense at Northwestern back in 2000 with Randy Walker. He was Randy's OC. And if you recall, Northwestern just burst on the scene and no one could stop that spread option because people had big blocky linebackers out there trying to cover 5 wideouts. And it was new. Rich Rodriguez had pretty much been the innovator, but Kevin Wilson was right there on the cutting edge of that offense. And he was an offensive mad scientist, a mastermind, went down to Oklahoma, set records with Oklahoma's offense in the mid-aughts, and then came back and worked for Urban Meyer for a little bit. Urban Meyer for just a little bit, and then got a head coaching gig at Indiana. And he was run out of there after a sort of I don't know if you call it a scandal, but he was emotionally and verbally abusing players. I don't think Tom Allen ever intended to be a head coach, but then he's thrust into this job. He does it pretty well. I believe that was 2016. I think he was the DC, and then he did it so well that it's Indiana. They said, okay, here's the job. You get the job. And I think what I'm trying to say is I think Tom Allen was always a DC at heart. But if you get a head coaching job, it's not like you're going to throw it away.
Right.
Especially the last 10 years, the amount of money you can make. We could name all sorts of coordinators who we're thinking right away, this guy should probably just stay a coordinator. But the money is like this, man. I mean, you triple your salary. And in the old days, that meant, $600,000 instead of $200,000. Now we're talking about millions of dollars. You can't say no. You can't say no. And there are a few DCs like Phil Parker at Iowa who just don't have the personality to be a head coach, and they know who they are, and they know their ceiling, and they don't want to. I imagine Phil Parker probably has had offers to be a head coach in the MAC or the Sun Belt or something like that, and he just said no. I'm happy where I am. I'm making $1.3 million here at Iowa. I'm going to keep this job. I'm going to keep, or certainly could have made more money as a DC than he's making in Iowa. He knew who he was, but a lot of guys, they know who they are too, but they can't say no to the money.
Yeah.
Tom Allen really didn't have any choice. They chose him, and then he did a really good job in Indiana for quite a while. I mean, he has very good connections in Florida. He was a high school coach in Tampa for 5 years. Then he was the DC at South Florida for a year. A pretty good gap in there. But he has connections all over Florida. I think he's going to be a sneaky good recruiter for James Franklin. And if you look at him, he kind of looks like an Indiana country boy, and that's what he is. But, I mean, he got Michael Penix out of Tampa. And that's not nothing, man. I mean, he couldn't keep him because they're Indiana. But if he's Penn State, they keep him.
Yeah.
They keep him.
And that's, I think, a part of this is you look at Tom Allen, you mentioned his background in Florida. Penn State already has Jaywan Sider, the running backs coach, who is so tied to Florida and does a really good job recruiting there. There's a chance that it might not be this cycle, but next cycle, that Jaywan Sider becomes a head coach somewhere, or at least an offensive coordinator somewhere if he wants to. That feels more like a Charles Huff situation. Like, I'm going to wait for he ended up going to Alabama and then becoming a head coach. But
did you see Charles in their game the other night?
I didn't know. Was it bad?
Well, they blew a big lead. They looked like they were going to run the other team out of the joint, and and it was Texas San Antonio they were playing.
Oh, UTSA, yeah. Did
And
Frank Harris play in that game or no?
Pardon me?
Did Frank Harris play in that game, the quarterback for UTSA?
I wasn't paying enough attention to know. I just was, it's one of those things. It's trash bowl season. You're kind of looking up. You probably know guys who bet these like crazy, right?
Yeah, there are some real sickos out there. I'm not one of them. I'm not that level. There are some real sickos out there, David.
That's why these games are on, though. That's why
exactly.
they're on. A lot of times there's nobody in the stadiums, but it doesn't matter. Anyway, I got far afield.
Anyway, there was a really good point, though, you made with Tom Allen and him being a D coordinator and kind of just being thrusted into this head coaching gig and keeping it for 7 years at Indiana. One of the biggest questions that James Franklin had, we asked Tom Allen, like, why did you take this job? The question to James is, why did you hire him? And that's not meant in like a negative way. It's just genuinely, hey, follow up. Why? You hire this guy. Why? And I think the biggest question that James had, or at least that's how he articulated it to us yesterday during his press conference, was when you have a head coach, who like, Manny or whoever, that you're hiring or looking at for a coordinator role, you want to make sure that they can still talk ball, that it's not going to be rusty for them to come in and call plays again. Because sometimes as a head coach in college football specifically,
you're a CEO.
You're a CEO of an organization. You can get drawn every which way. And James said that when Tom talked to him and the other defensive staffers that Penn State has in the Lash building, that it was obvious that he's, whether he was calling plays or not at Indiana, because it was kind of on and off again, depending on which defensive coordinator they had and who was leaving and whatever. But it was obvious to James Franklin and his staff that he was still very in tune, with defensive play calling, scheme, fundamentals, everything that you kind of want and need in a defensive coordinator, especially if you're James Franklin, who has an offensive background and kind of he wants a head coach of the defense to handle everything.
That's the thing that I think there are a couple of the same reasons that you hire Manny Diaz is it's really useful for a head coach to have another head coach on the staff. And this guy isn't just a head coach. He ran a Big Ten program for 7 years. He can fill in all the little gaps that he knows Franklin needs without being asked. He knows what a head coach has to deal with. So that's good. Also, I think, unlike Diaz, I think Tom Allen would be happy if he never was a head coach again. And you heard the answer. I forget. Tyler asked the question. It was a really good question. Yeah. Do you remember how he asked that question? Because I can't remember.
No, I remember that. Yeah, you're talking Tyler Donahue at 24/7, right?
Yeah. And Tom's answer was really good because he knew it was a good question. It's about getting back into what you're talking about, being into a pure coordinator.
Right.
Because that's who he is.
Yeah.
I don't think he ever wanted to be a big-time college head coach. He was a high school head coach. He was a small college head coach, but he never looked to be one of these guys that he became that was just thrust onto him. I think in his pure best life, and you heard him, he's like, I want to get back in their room and have small groups of people and talk to guys individually and maybe watch tape with them. That's who he is. Yeah. He did an admirable job under a situation where you've got a third of the resources of Penn State, and he had it going there for a couple of years, and then he loses Kalen DeBoer, his coordinator, to Washington. And then the portal happens, and then Penix is out the door a year later, and then Kalen DeBoer went to Fresno. He ends up at Washington. Penix follows him. It's a no-win situation when you're in a place like Indiana. And it's why Indiana, in the next generation of college football in a few years, I don't know how many years, but Indiana's not going to be in it. It's going to be 32 teams, 40 teams, 26 teams, whatever, at the elite level of college football, and they're going to play in their own league like the NFL, and Indiana will not be there because Indiana does not belong in a league with Penn State. Honestly, they don't. No one in Indiana cares about college football. They care about basketball. It's the exact opposite, and it's hard, man. It's hard to run a program like Indiana. And when people say, well, why are we hiring somebody from Indiana? I don't understand this. They got no idea the challenges that Tom Allen faced and met for a while. but I think the portal really hurt him. NIL really hurt him. I mean, I think the biggest sugar daddy Indiana football has is John Mellencamp. I mean, I don't think they have many, you know.
Yeah.
I don't know specifically. I know he's one, but it's just like it's hard. It's like playing checkers when everyone else is playing chess. So the question I have about Allen is I don't know. He's never had all these resources, and he's never had this many high-end talents, guys with real gift. But I think he's going to be like a kid in a candy store. Yeah. At least for Penn State fans, I hope that's true, because all of a sudden he's going to have a lot of guys who can do everything instead of few guys who can do some things and having to arrange them. This is the first job he's had in 31 years where he is all of a sudden on the Tiffany block, is the way I put it. Yeah. He has always been on corner stores every damn job he's ever had, even the Power 5 jobs he's had, or they're Mississippi and Indiana.
Right.
And that's not the power strata that he's in now. No. So the money is big, but the expectations are big also. And that's what I wonder about.
Yeah, and you can already tell though that he's excited for the opportunity.
He looks like he really wants to get at it, and that's what I liked. I mean, you talk about a guy who there are people who say people in your generation. What are you, Y generation or Z generation? What are you?
I have no idea.
Are you Gen Y?
Is it? I think I'm technically a millennial. I'm 30 years old. I don't know.
There are people you understand who say that there's no energy in this generation. They're not high energy people. Tom Allen is like your favorite gym teacher is like, okay, what are we going to do today? You know,
it's softball time, guys.
I know, which is great because he's like plugged into a socket all the time. And yeah. I hope that he's going to be able to make that transition.
Yeah, and not only from the press conference, you could sense that excitement. You know, on signing day in the morning, Penn State has this live feed that whenever the kids, whenever those, the prospects commit, become official, they bring them up on, FaceTime or Zoom or whatever it is, with everyone in the room in the Lash building. And Tom Allen was there, and you could tell that he was already talking to these guys. I mean, some of them he recruited, like John Mitchell and Antoine Belgrave Shorter, a couple of defensive backs from Jacksonville. He recruited them when he was at Indiana. So he already has some relationships there. But yeah, it was interesting to see him already be kind of very into it. You could just tell right from the bat. And it was like kind of I guess it's easy too when your first day really there or on the job. I don't think he's technically on the job yet, but he is in the facility and wearing Penn State gear and all that. For your first day to be signing day when it's just kind of a celebration for these staffers. I'm sure some of the defensive staffers are just like, we put in all this work to get all these kids, to come in, and then Tom just gets to come in and be happy for him. But it was a good day for Penn State overall. I mean, just getting into signing day a little bit. I mean, they had 25 verbal commitments in the 2024 class. They signed all of them. No drama. And I think a big part of that was, and James Franklin alluded to this and mentioned this in his press conference, is that they were able to get their two, coordinators hired and in before signing day. Manny Diaz leaves for Duke. 2 weeks later, you got Tom Allen. Mike Yurcich is fired after Michigan. You get Andy Kotelnicki at the start of the month to talk to Ethan Grunkmeyer, the quarterback from Ohio, Quentin Martin, the running back from Bell Vernon. These four-star guys who have been committed to Penn State for a very long time, but also I'm sure we're hearing for others, from other schools when their respective coordinators that had such a big role in recruiting them ended up leaving or getting fired. And
if you're Indiana, can you replace these guys with those guys that quickly? Hell no. I mean, Allen never replaced Kalen DeBoer, really. He never had that kind of guy. He had him for a couple of years, but now you can see what he's doing. I mean, it's one of the best coach teams in Power 5 in the whole country is Washington. And he never would have been able to pull that off at Indiana. But when you have the resources of Penn State, you can do what James Franklin's doing because they know it's the top level. Who would turn him down? You have to have a head coaching offer to turn him down.
Right. Yeah, and this is, you look at the talent that's coming in. It's a top 15 class nationally. If you look at 24/7 Sports, I believe they're ranked second in the Big Ten, behind only Ohio State. I
And
think,
ahead of Michigan. Yeah.
yeah, Michigan was down there at,
What are they, 10th nationally? Is that right?
I think Penn State,
Yeah.
or I think they were around 14 or 15.
Okay.
But still, it's a really good class. I think it was a good mix too of like the obvious talents. I mentioned Ethan, but you got risers in the class. Like, they're getting in early on a lot of these guys too, which is really nice to see. I mean, look at Drew Aller's commitment. He was a 3-star under the radar quarterback, and then he kind of blossoms into that 5-star. Similar deal with Ethan Grunkmeyer, the quarterback out of Ohio.
He's a 4-star, isn't he?
He was a 4-star. I think ESPN has him rated as high as the number 5 quarterback in the class. This time last year, Ethan Grunkmeyer had one offer, and it was Miami of Ohio. And it took until April for Penn State and Mike Yurcich to go see him again, and then eventually offer, and he commits. And so I think Penn State is you look at quarterback first in these classes. I think they got a good one in Ethan Grunkmeyer.
He seems like an interesting kid, and that's
yeah.
Ohio State's backyard. That's essentially Columbus, where he's from.
Yep.
And he seems like a very interesting kid, and he's somebody that'd be good to do a feature on.
Yeah, and he has an NIL deal already, Dave, with Express. He was dressed to the nines for signing day on Wednesday.
So. What's Express? Never heard of it.
But it was
One Express.
Ethan's he's a good kid. He's a good dude. And there's a connection there too, because his personal quarterbacks coach is the same as Drew Aller's, Brad Mendler, from QB Accelerate out in Ohio. So they've kind of got a little mini pipeline there, I guess. I don't know if 2 guys constitutes a pipeline, but still, James Franklin said, hey, if we can just keep getting high-level quarterbacks from Ohio, sure, I'm in. But there's a lot of interesting tidbits about this class too. There's 3 sets of teammates in high school. You look at Corey Smith and Donovan Harbor from Wisconsin, Catholic Memorial out there. I mentioned John Mitchell and Antoine Belgrave Shorter from Mandarin High School in Jacksonville. And then, I mentioned Central Catholic at the top of this podcast, Anthony Specca and Peter Gonzalez from there. So a lot of familiarity between these guys. And a lot of them have been committed for a long time. I mean, you look at Cooper Cousins, the first guy in the class, committed like what felt like 5 years ago from Erie McDowell. But yeah, I think this is a good class overall. I think it's one that James Franklin is comfortable with, the fan base is comfortable and happy with, and rightfully so.
I don't know what's going to happen with these 2 coordinators, but I know they can coach, both of them. Maybe they're not as sexy hires, certainly not as Manny Diaz. And Mike Yurcich was kind of a sexy hire. People knew who he was, had coached dynamic offenses. Well, Lance Leipold knows exactly who can coach ball. And he had an OC who was a very hot commodity around. Now, who watches Kansas? Not a lot of people watch Kansas, but I suspect that guy really knows what he's doing, and I know damn well that Tom Allen knows what he's doing. So I know both these guys can coach ball, and they're going to love being coordinators at this place.
Absolutely. No, and I mentioned just one last bit on the recruiting end. I talked about the quarterback, the number 1 prospect in Pennsylvania staying home at Penn State. Quentin Martin from Bell Vernon, the running back.
Quentin who?
Quentin Martin.
You said Martin. You said Martin. It like people from you said Martin.
Quentin Martin.
You said Martin. You said it like people from Trenton. People from Trenton can't say Trenton. You know that, right?
I do know that.
They say Trenton. Yeah. Go ahead.
He's one to keep an eye on for next season. Andy Kotelnicki, the new offensive coordinator, loves to use his running backs out of the backfield and just get his best playmakers in space. Even in a running back room with Nick Singleton and Katron Allen, don't be surprised if Quentin Martin don't be surprised if he gets the ball. A lot of these guys will be enrolling early as well. I don't have the full list in front of me, but it's more than half the class. So they'll be getting in for spring ball, for winter conditioning, all that kind of good stuff. So more to come on that, though, in the coming days. Dave, do you have any final thoughts before we wrap this thing up?
Have you watched any Ole Miss?
Not yet. I haven't
I
had
said
time.
Old Miss. You can't do that either. Ole Miss.
I haven't had time yet. I will though. In the next couple days, I'm going to be breaking it down. But what are your thoughts? Initial.
I think I'm not sure. I don't think they're a fantastic offense, but I think they're really good.
Yeah.
And they're coached by an offensive guru in Lane Kiffin. And I don't think Penn State has faced an offense this good all year. I think when they were going up against Ohio State, their receivers weren't. Some of them were still banged up, and Kyle McCord never really got a groove going. And I don't think Michigan was playing all that well on offensively the last month, partly because they were playing smash mouth because their OC had to be the head coach, and I think he was taking very few risks, Jerome Moore. So I don't know that Penn State has played an offense this good all year. Certainly, it's between those two. These guys are a lot better than Maryland, and there haven't been a lot of good offenses or a lot of good quarterbacks in the Big Ten lately. So my question is, I'm pretty sure that Mississippi has played defenses at the level of Penn State's. They played Georgia and Alabama. A&M was a really good defense, but I'm not sure Penn State's defense has played an offense this good. That would be my question about this game. And I think Penn State -4, is that what it is now?
I think so.
Boy, I'd bet on this on that, wouldn't you? I might. Would you bet the money line? That's the question.
Well, that's the thing. If you're going to take them +4, you might as well
take them to win. Yeah,
just take them to win. I think because
yeah.
I think Penn State either. And again, this is not like I've watched Ole Miss this year just like casually and being with the AP vote, like keeping tabs on how all these teams are doing. But it feels like this is going to be either like a defensive just struggle that Penn State would love to have, and kind of just grind out like a 10 7 10 13.
I think they're hoping for that.
Then they're hoping for that, but.
Yeah.
If this gets to be like, hey, who has the ball last or something like that, like I would lean Ole Miss to just win it. But
and while neither Kyle McCord nor JJ McCarthy was playing particularly well when Penn State played them, Jackson Dart's been playing better and better and better this season. I mean, he was in a battle for the job at the start of the season.
Yeah.
And he not only won the job again, but then really improved this year. So I think just that.
Yeah, and one more thing on Jackson Dart. He uses his legs and uses them well. And when you don't have Chop Robinson out there, I know Adisa Isaac will play and Denai Dennis Sutton will play. So you've got really talented DNs to not only pressure the quarterback, but keep contained and all those good things. They could miss Chop out there because he's such a menace off the edge and just kind of puts the quarterback in conflict so early in his progressions that without Chop, I think Adisa's played at a really high level this year, but they could be missing Chop out there. But
yeah, and they're going to get the ball out or hand it to Judkins and
he's a stud. He's a stud.
Yeah, man. I mean, they've got a lot of different facets of that offense working well. We don't know what the hell Penn State's offense is going to put out there, and it's probably going to be what it's always been. So Penn State needs to keep this, I think, in a phone booth, and I don't know if they can.
We'll see. Yeah. We'll see, Dave. Well, hey, it was great catching up with you.
Want to see my tree?
Yeah, I do.
Where's the tree? There it is. There. See? Nice tree.
That's a nice tree. You got a lot of ornaments on that thing.
Yeah. I don't do a damn thing. Yeah.
I love it. It. Awesome. Well, I guess I'll see you in Atlanta next, right?
Yep.
All right. Well, have a good Christmas and all that. And everyone listening, be sure to keep tabs on the Blue White Breakdown on your feeds. Be sure to subscribe to our tech subscriber base where you can get commentary and thoughts and interact with me, Dave, Bob, Joe Hermit, our photographer ahead of the Peach Bowl after signing day. Transfer portal is open. A lot of stuff is going to be happening. So, but everyone have a great weekend upcoming and happy holidays.
And we'll see you in Atlanta.